Let's face it, you've known your whole life that you're different. Your thought process, your ability to see through the bullshit, and your refusal to follow the crowd in order to blend in. It's not a coincidence. Power is that. Presence is that. And that's precisely why you make people uneasy. They are unsure of how to deal with someone who doesn't need approval to feel whole, who doesn't laugh to fit in, who doesn't accept mediocrity, and who doesn't compromise themselves for the sake of others' comfort. They refer to it as arrogance, but they know in their hearts that it's genuine. Authenticity that upends the world they have constructed on a facade. You were not made to be a little kid. You weren't supposed to become any smaller. You were made to upend, raise, and question everything they take for granted. That tense feeling you get when you enter a space? That isn't a rejection. That's acknowledgement. Before you even say a word, they sense your vibe. And whether they acknowledge it or not, they are aware that they are seeing something unique. So, chosen one, take a proud stance. Allow their uneasiness to serve as confirmation. There is no denying your presence, your strength, and your intelligence. And guess what? The world isn't prepared for it. That is not your issue. It is theirs. Some individuals float wherever the tide of popular acceptance carries them, moving through life like currents in a huge ocean. Not you, however. Without being deterred by the tide of naive expectations, you forge your own route. Your need for depth makes you stand out in a society that relies on superficial interactions. You don't put up with useless social customs, vacuous conversations, or empty words. You don't feel uncomfortable throughout these times. It's the obvious burden of discord. A world addicted to diversions will never be able to comprehend a mind that is focused on the truth. It seems like a betrayal to try to fit in. It's not simply tiring to water oneself down to their comfort level. It drains your spirit. You don't pretend to be interested. You don't mimic meaningless giggles. Furthermore, you don't engage in the implicit game of pretending to be someone else. This has nothing to do with being tough. It all comes down to not wanting to sacrifice your identity. Something strong occurs the instant you don't fit in. Your presence draws attention to their deceit. Your remarks don't make people uneasy. It's your unwillingness to comply. Your quiet turns become a mirror, reflecting the things they'd prefer not to talk about. As a result, they convert their discomfort into animosity rather of confronting their own conflicts. It is unusual for people who see honesty as a danger to face their discomfort head-on. Rather, they pass it off as judgment. They accuse you of being aloof, challenging, or conceited. Not because you despise them, but rather because you don't believe the lies they maintain. You don't look for approval or demand attention. However, your very existence upsets the delicate balance they've established. They are unaware that you are the source of their discomfort. It's the obvious difference between their unsaid fears and your unflinching honesty. Even if they don't completely comprehend it, they can feel it. Your thoughts don't go according to the pattern they're used to. Their expectations are not met by your enthusiasm, and they say it's too much when they can't match your intensity. But what they really mean is that your mere presence challenges the standards they've blindly accepted. You upend their meticulously constructed illusions just by being you. Instead of following this world's pattern, let your thinking to be renewed. Romans chapter 12:2. Imagine a large, solitary tree perched on a hill. The storm rages and the wind howls, yet its roots are strong and unfazed by the mayhem around it. Huddled together in the valley, the other trees wobble in whichever direction the wind directs them to as they bend with each blow. They refer to it as oneness. They refer to it as belonging. The single tree, however, is unmoved by anything that does not originate from within, not because it aspires to be distinct. Chosen one, that's you. Silent agreements, unquestioning patterns, and rhythms that keep individuals in line with the masses are the foundation of the world. Conversations recur. Throughout the day, empty gestures are repeated. Additionally, the unwritten rule is quite clear. If you comply, you will be welcomed. If you go too far, people will see you as dangerous. However, this oneness isn't based on strength, which is the reality they refuse to acknowledge. It is based on reliance. It's a fine equilibrium maintained by the silent dread of standing alone rather than by genuineness. They thus sense it when you don't participate, when you don't nod in agreement with meaningless statements, or when you get engrossed in the cacophony. Your quiet is louder than their performance, so they feel the weight of your presence, not because you demand attention. To feel whole, you don't need approval. They find it unsettling that you don't need praise to recognize your value. Your remoteness is not seen by them as neutrality. They interpret it as condemnation. They refer to it as arrogance, but in reality they're asking, why don't you need what we need? Why don't you participate in the game? Because if you can fend for yourself and navigate this world without reducing yourself to fit in, then they can too. And the idea is horrifying. Thus they become resentful as a result of their discomfort. They push back because your independence makes them face something they've avoided all their lives: the reality that their strength was never truly theirs. This isn't because you've wronged them. The group, the approval, and the false sense of belonging were the sources, and they are completely shaken when that illusion breaks. Now listen to me. You don't have to bear that weight. You weren't intended to float with the flow. In a world made of shifting sand, you were meant to be the rock, the beacon, and the unwavering pillar of truth. Allow them to misinterpret you. Let them question you. Let them call you whatever makes them feel safe. It changes nothing. Because at the end of the day, when the noise fades, when the distractions lose their power, when the ones who mocked you are left alone with their own thoughts, there you will stand, strong as ever. And one by one, they will begin to realize you were never rejecting them. You were simply refusing to reject yourself. Few things are more disruptive than someone who refuses to play by the unspoken rules. A world built on routine doesn't welcome those who challenge the script. Rejecting small conversation isn't merely a personal choice. It's a divergence from the anticipated, a warning that the ordinary is no longer adequate. And in one single denial, a whole system trembles. It's simpler to reject the non-conforming as aloof than to recognize they show the superficial character of many encounters. The anxiety isn't about arrogance or detachment. It's the unshakable sense that someone else has chosen a route of depth, while others stay glued to the surface. But this is not about superiority. It's about integrity. Upholding a timeless standard in a society ready to compromise everything for the sake of acceptability. It's an uncommon act of rebellion. It compels confrontation, not with a person, but with the knowledge that genuine satisfaction means breaking away from the anticipated. There's a hidden revolution in authenticity, a modest change that alters the typical routines of people who meet it. It doesn't demand attention, nor does it seek approval, yet it lingers. It fosters uncertainty in the minds of folks who've spent years observing unwritten norms. A question starts to form. What if there's more? What if the depth that formerly seemed strange is, in reality, the missing piece? Some people will object to the concept and hold on to what they know better. However, a lot of people will eventually realize that it is an invitation to go beyond the boundaries they previously believed to be unbreakable. Standing apart causes pain, but this is not a sign of weakness. It's an indication that the mold was never intended to fit, to shrink, to conform, or to soften the edges of personality in order to gain acceptance. It's similar to wearing clothing that never fits properly. Real strength comes from being ready to stay the same in the face of expectation and from refusing to give up. Others start to see the flaws in the delusions they previously accepted for reality under that unwavering presence. Selection, not isolation, is what solitude is. Adopting an unorthodox route does not entail aimlessly straying. Others, those who have the same fire inside themselves, will come along the journey and recognize it in your soul. These are the valuable bonds, not the ones created for convenience, but the ones based on mutual respect. Give up trying to be understood by those who aren't on your level. You won't need to soften, shrink, or bend in order to be among the people who really matter. Without coercion or compromise, their energies will naturally align. Standing strong serves a purpose, not just for your own survival, but also as a beacon, proving that it is possible to live a life that is pure, unrepentant, and completely in line with your true self. Refusing to comply is not revolt in and of itself. It is a creative endeavor that constructs a world in which depth is expected rather than uncommon. Additionally, every instance of authenticity has a ripple effect, reawakening something long dormant in others and demonstrating to them that there is more than just fitting in. Learning the skill of detachment is about understanding where to focus your attention, not about ignoring the outside world. Not every circumstance warrants involvement, and not every instant necessitates it. Silence, self-control, and knowing when to stake your ground are all powerful. Reaction is the lifeblood of a civilization fixated on approval. It anticipates a reaction, a performance, and compliance with unwritten guidelines. Silent disobedience is shown by taking a step back and removing oneself from the unimportant. And those who rely on outside validation are disturbed by that disobedience. It disturbs those who use pressure, anticipation, or persuasion to gain control. The appearance of influence vanishes when efforts to incite are greeted with apathy. Detachment is neither superiority nor coldness. It is a statement that one's presence is a decision rather than a given. A decision to save energy for things that replenish rather than drain. And that decision is what really undermines manipulation more than any justification or argument. Be brave and powerful. Don't be scared or frightened by them, for the Lord, your God, is with you. He won't ever abandon you, according to Deuteronomy 31:6. Regardless of how strong the winds, picture a lighthouse standing up against the roaring storm, unflinching and shining brightly. Why doesn't that lighthouse plead with the seas to stop? Because it doesn't decrease its brightness. The darkness is cozy. It just is. That's you, chosen one, a force, a beacon, an unmistakable presence. You see, being really detached does not mean abandoning the world. It involves looking within and exploring the core of your identity, where the weight of eternal truth causes human viewpoints to shatter, and where heavenly clarity replaces confusion. You maintain your connection even when you move away from the commotion. You become enlightened. The false attachments and diversions go, and all of a sudden you realize the path you were always supposed to take. Therefore, being alone is not a punishment. It's getting ready. You will be misinterpreted by others. They'll claim that you've changed, that you've become aloof, and that you no longer interact with others the way you once did. Listen to me though. Depth is what they refer to as distance. The reluctance to shrink is what they refer to as arrogance. What is meant by detachment? You are just responding to a greater call. This is the actual deal. The folks who used to stroll next to you could now feel uncomfortable around you. Your progress serves as a reminder of what they have chosen to overlook, not because you have rejected them or harmed them. Their stagnation is highlighted by your advancement. Their perplexity is intolerable due to your lucidity. And that's why they want to stop you, chosen one. It isn't intimate. It has a spiritual component. Know this. An eagle never apologizes for flying high while others choose to crawl. And a lion does not care what sheep think. Living in the shadow of other people's fears is not why you were sent on this planet. You were invited to stand, to rise, to be the whole version of yourself that God made you to be. Furthermore, this is not an easy route. The air becomes thinner as you go higher. Not everyone will be able to accompany you on this journey. Many will go. You will even be resented by some. However, do not interpret their disappearance as a sign of loss. It's alignment. Not everyone is destined to follow your path. What do you do then? You continue to walk. You continue to shine. You remain unflinching, and unstoppable as you stand tall in the truth. This world's diversions will attempt to drag you back into mediocrity. However, you weren't made for the shallow end, chosen one. It was meant for you to walk on water. Every social group and culture functions according to an unspoken code, a commitment to maintain a cadence that guarantees unity. It feeds on unwritten customs, mimicking facial expressions, engaging in polite discourse that functions more as a performance than a transaction, and more. However, some people find these movements strange. Refusing to participate is not an act of rebellion. Rather, it is a kind of constraint. It is an automatic reaction to anything that is out of alignment. Not everyone notices the decision to leave this dance. It disturbs, not because it is violent, but because it dispels the appearance of need. Others are compelled to face their own tendencies when one voice deviates from the norm. The person who interrupts is not the cause of the ensuing unpleasantness. It concerns those who feel vulnerable. The entire basis of its existence is shaken by a quiet rebellion against conformity. Resistance then emerges. The underlying need to re-establish familiarity drives attempts to reintegrate the non-conforming, not out of hate. Labels and judgments are used in an attempt to discredit the uncontrollable. Authenticity, however, doesn't need permission. It remains motionless. It is a silent revolution in and of itself. The truth will set you free, and you will know it. John 8:32. Consider a bird that has spent so much time in a cage that it has forgotten what it is like to fly. One day, the door swings open, but instead of taking off, it pauses and observes as one of its own dares to go. The escapee is not celebrated by the others. No, they despise, dread, and scorn it. They yell, "Where do you think you're going? You belong here with us." They know in their hearts that the only thing holding them in is the conviction that they have to remain. You dwell in that world, chosen one. A world composed on unquestioning silent agreements and invisible borders. They claim that this is just the way things are, and everyone does it this way. However, when you break free from the pattern, stop nodding along, and refuse to shrink in order to maintain the illusion, you reveal something horrifying. None of it was ever genuine. There were no regulations at all. The expectations were not legally binding. They were options. People made decisions because they were simpler than dealing with the uncertainty, and for that reason, people respond as they do. Not due to any wrongdoing on your part. Your sheer presence compels people to examine the prison they constructed for themselves, not because you have hurt them. Resenting you is simpler than acknowledging that they were holding the key the whole time. You see, involvement is essential to the system. Whatever the game is, it doesn't matter whether it's playing small, concealing the truth, or blindly adhering to routines. Only until everyone decides to act as if it's required will it succeed. The illusion begins to crumble as soon as someone leaves it. It can never be hidden once it splits. Your presence is so disruptive because of this. There is no need to dispute. Nothing has to be proven by you. Simply by being steadfast and refusing to change, you upend the entire basis on which they have constructed their life. You are dangerous because you show that they never had to be confined in the first place, not because you want to destroy. They'll resist. They'll fight back. They are terrified, not because they despise you. Anger, ridicule, and disdain are just a few of the ways fear may seem. The fact still stands, though. What you have, they could have as well. And it is the main thing that disturbs them. Let them respond then. Allow people to label you too much, difficult, and conceited. Give them a chance to entice you back in. It doesn't alter the truth, because you can never return to pretending once you've seen through the illusion. Being a prisoner in a world of invisible shackles was not intended for you. You were designed to soar. Tension emerges when what is concealed is revealed, and whether they acknowledge it or not as they see you, something within of them says, maybe I was meant to fly too. Conflict is not always external. Some conflicts between the ego and the image one presents to the outside world are fought in private. Identity insecurity is reliant on outside validation, and the foundation starts to wobble when that reinforcement isn't there. Whether they are aggressive, protective, or dismissive, reactions often center on the ego that feels vulnerable, rather than the person that maintains their position. A mind that is controlled by self-doubt and dread does not enjoy contrast. It tries to discredit the power that disturbs it by resisting and lashing out. However, underneath that resistance lurks something more profound, an implicit acknowledgement, a germ of consciousness. And the truth persists despite the ego's efforts to keep it under control. Not everyone will accept it. Some people will hold on to their manufactured world more tightly. For some, however, the uncomfortable moment will signal the start of a change inside. Rarely does growth come easily. Resistance is frequently the first step, and the most powerful disruptions are those that just exist as indisputable evidence that there is another path, rather than those that call for change. The darkness cannot defeat the light, which shines in the darkness. John 15. Imagine a solitary flame in a completely dark environment. It doesn't have to yell. It is not required to compel anything. It just burns, and the darkness is forced to flee as soon as it emerges. The darkness is not argued with. It shines without asking permission. It just is. You are a spark in a world that has become too used to darkness. Chosen one. This isn't where you were sent to blend in. Being little was not your calling. There's a reason you were put here at this moment with this fire inside you. And believe me when I say that as soon as you enter, people sense that fire. Others shudder at it, while others are lured to it. It's not because you hurt them, not due to any wrongdoing on your part, but because all that has been concealed in the dark is revealed by your light. Listen to me now. The responses you elicit are not about you. When they get uneasy, rejection does not occur when they push back or attempt to make you feel like the issue. That is enlightenment. You serve as a reminder that life may be lived in a different manner, that life need not be limited to meaningless routines, fleeting diversions, and public acceptance. They are frightened by it not because they despise you, but because they know in their souls what you stand for. Some will snap. They will accuse you of being too much, conceited and challenging. They will attempt to convince you that your intelligence is undesirable and that your profundity is a burden. But pay great attention. When the truth enters the room, those who have based their whole existence on delusions will constantly fight it. You don't need to persuade them. You don't need to provide an explanation. The atmosphere will change just by your presence. The truth is, you don't have to make your light go down for them. The mere fact that some ships disregard a lighthouse's instructions does not lead it to become less brilliant. It remains steadfast, unflinching, and unshaken, certain that its presence will guide those who are prepared. Thus, continue to live your truth. Remain tall, even if it causes discomfort to others.